I'm Rick Bennett and I'm in Fletcher Park. I'll be talking about ways to paint from life. You'll hear some cars, birds, and people as things happen in the park. Painting from life is a reactive situation. The light will change and wonderful things will appear and disappear, so watch what happens and capture the best moments in photographs. You can refer to them as you're painting, and you can also take them back and paint from the studio. If you decide to try plein air painting, you can use materials that you already have and not buy equipment until you're happy with and comfortable with the process. A folding chair and a rolling cart can become your place to paint. Andrew Wyeth sat on the hood of his car and had his canvas on his lap. He said, "I don't really have a studio. I wander around people's attics, out in the fields and cellars, any place he could find that invited him." Georgia O'Keeffe had a pad on the ground and spread her materials out around her. When you do decide to buy equipment, there's telescoping tripods that are very portable and light and can travel in a bag. Some people have the French easels that fold up into a box and transport easily. They're heavier, but they have more space and more stability. This one is set up for short. You can extend the legs and paint standing up, and that's how I do. This person is painting in the sun, and I don't advise that. It's going to affect how you judge your colors on your paper. So I took a picture of the tree at an ideal moment when the light was coming in and out, like it wasn't in my previous segment, but it is now at the moment. So having a photograph of this moment lets me see the light playing in there. I have a mat that has been cut into two sections, and I use it to crop. So when you're out in life, you can hold this up and you can decide whether you're going to zoom in on just a section, whether you're going to come in and make it a vertical, whether you're going to make it a horizontal. You have choices and editing, and there's 100 different paintings in front of you, and you have to decide which elements are going to be what you want to show. One of the things I do when I start a new subject, or sometime if I'm looking for inspiration, is I will look at paintings by famous artists. John Singer Sargent had an interpretation of the landscape in front of him here. He had a lot of marks, and he abstracted the shapes a lot, and he used interesting colors that may or may not have been there at that moment. John Marin painted the correct shapes. He filled them with color and had a different take on his landscape. Winslow Homer has more realism in this painting. It's got formed up figures that give scale and oranges that go well with the blues in the skies. I painted a landscape of a point in Oriental, North Carolina. I used bright, lively colors that weren't there at all, but I made them up. Before you start, have a plan of how you're going to proceed. What is it you want to point the eye to? What is the subject? I like the shape of this tree, and I think that it has a wonderful energy to it. It gives a scale to the sky, which is going to be really big and large. Sometimes you have to choose what to put in and what to take out. I like this low background of trees back here. I'm probably going to just continue it off right here so I have more sky and don't have this little bump up right there. I'm going to take the fence out because I don't need that in there. So the choices you made will determine how the painting proceeds. So the first thing I'll do is I'm going to reserve my tree. I've drawn it in and I know where it's going to be, so I'm going to paint my trunk in and then start with that. So if you watched my video, How to Paint a Rooster, I talked about mixing good colors. If you haven't seen it, you should, and it'll cover those things. I will talk a little bit about the specific colors for this painting. I'm using Orange Lake to neutralize my cerulean blue. I'm using ultramarine blue, and I'm using alizarin crimson, and those are the main colors. I've taken those and mixed those into different strings of color. I took the ultramarine blue and added yellow to it, and that's a cadmium yellow, and it made a yellow green. I've added some orange to it, and that made it an olive kind of color. And then I'm going to have a blue green, which has some blue in it, which is going to have some green tones in it. So I did a color sample first to see if I was going to like the blend of these colors, and I'm really pleased with the neutrals that these are giving us. So I'm not going to be painting in loud colors, but I'm going to be painting in these pretty quiets and talk about the prettiness of the day. I'm going to use the ultramarine blue in the foreground on my sky and the cerulean in the back as it recedes back. And on the trunk of my tree, I'm going to use the alizarin crimson and the cerulean, and it's going to make this purpley gray color. And I like that a lot. I'm going to be layering yellows and my string of greens on top to make the leaves. So I'm going to paint my tree first, and I have very little drawing in there, and I've offset it so that the tree will be a setting down here, and then I'll have a lot of room for a big juicy sky. The trees that would come across here are going to be very implied and not a lot of detail. I don't have to worry about erasing back a lot of this tree trunks because I'm going to be painting darks on top of them. So I'm going to use a wet brush and a pigment brush, and I come in first with some yellows on one side of my trunk just to get a feeling of light peeking through in some spots. Then I come next to it with some neutrals that's going to be like on the shadowed side, and just start to tone that trunk down and talk about some differing colors. I like to play with colors, so I'm going to bring some alizarin crimson in there and let it peek through. So I'm just starting to build some darks and lights and think about which direction the sunlight is coming from and where my shadows fall. Now the tree trunk will be in shadows in some spots and in the sun in others. So what this is gonna allow me to do is it disappears behind foliage in some spots. So I'm just changing in and out between some lights and some talking of light and some feeling. And I'm doing the thicker trunks, dropping in some spots where it changes colors in and out, so they'll feel like, and this reserves those spots where the trunk peeks in and out. Yeah, that's nice. See, see that brown that it created there? That's really nice. Let's get down here. And I just have these mix of colors off to the side there that I've pre-made. Alizarin crimson, cerulean, and yellow. Alizarin crimson and the cerulean make a purpley gray color. And when you add yellow to purple, that's the complement, and that's what's creating my darks. And see how interesting this is? The tree is changing colors. I'm using the multiple colors in multiple places, so it'll make it feel like it's talking about the same subject. So now I'm going to do some of those fine line branches, and I like to use sticks to do this. One, because it just feels fun. If you come in and the pores will actually hold pigment, and it's got an edge to it, and I can come in and I just drop in some very squiggly little shapes that are thin, and I come in with some darks so I can, oops, that's a thick old shape, and that's thicker than I want, so I'm just going to lift that back out, and that'll be covered up with some line work. Sometimes that happens, so you can test your stick to make sure you got the right amount on there. But look at that thin gestural quality that's happening when you start just scratching these little shapes in. And it's not a brush stroke. A brush stroke can feel kind of similar if you constantly use that same tool. It doesn't capture that line quality. And I'm dabbing off a little bit before I put it onto the paper so that I don't get that big old blob like I did a minute ago. And you just keep using that. This holds a lot of pigment, which is amazing to me for a stick. So that's why I like working with this. It's got two little areas right in there. And I've got some lines drawn, and I'm just following those, but it doesn't have to be precise because there's nothing precise about this. Branches. but I'm taking ideas from the tree in front of me. If you draw out of your head, you're going to draw cliches, and life is going to give you fresh new ideas that you didn't have yourself, that weren't filed away in your preconception of what a tree may look like. So that's as much as I'm going to put in right now. Next, I'll talk about putting in the leaves. I like to paint tree leaves by layering. I use a sponge, and I'll come in and I'm just going to reconstitute some of this paint right there, get it a little thinner. Yeah, there we go. So I got plenty of water in it. I take my sponge and I wet it, very wet, and then wring out the excess in the whole sponge. And then that allows it to have water all the way through. And then I start with my lights, and I just dab it into there, and then see how it's speckly. This is going to give me little edges of light, pale yellows, and there's spaces between the leaves, but I'm not painting leaves. I'm talking about leaves, and I'm just coming in. See this little gap right there? I'm filling that in because that's where foliage is blocking the trunk that's coming through. And then I'm just gonna come in here. Now this is gonna be very bright yellow. And I'm just looking up at the tree, and it has those spots where they just come out a little further, and they're just almost orphaned, and you can't see the stem up there, and it's just creating an edge. There's gonna be masses, and we're gonna talk about masses as we build these colors. And so places where it just kind of comes down. And right now our tree is very yellow, and that's fine because we're going to come on top of it at some points with a little bit of another color, like, and see how that blends right there where I touch the yellow. I'm creating a receding color, and it starts to build boughs, and that's what we're wanting to make. Soft edge, some openings in the middle where the birds can fly through, and we just want to start talking about that soft edge that leaves have. In masses, they become darker because there's thick spots, but at the edges and in thin spots, see how it blends? Right now my yellow is still a little moist, and I'm getting some blends of colors and flows where they're blending together. And I'm outside, so this is gonna I'm changing up color now. I'm pulling out a different one. And see that color, that change to that browner tone? That's gonna be some neutrals. And it starts to quiet spots and change. And I'm just looking at masses. I'm looking at places where they come out like this. And the center of the tree has more of these spots, and maybe denser spots. So I'm gonna come in and just smush. That's the technical term. You smush the sponge down. That cracked me up. And it creates bigger, more solids. And I'm making sure I keep turning and putting edges different, so it's not a stamping of same shapes over and over again. And see how quiet these greens are? These are neutralized. I've got some orange in there, and it's creating that olive look to it. This is going to be some of my darks in the center. I'm not going to use a lot of this, but I'm just going to create some spots. You can use this side to blend. See how that blended in there where I had some darks that were a little darker than I wanted? I can soften and blend. Now I'm gonna come over, I'm gonna clean out my sponge, squeeze out the excess paint, and then I'm gonna come in with some cleaner, prettier, a little bit yellow. I've got water on my hands and it's falling off. That's what happens when you paint outdoors. There's some spots that are just gonna have to be splaned. There we go. As you paint, you'll see when you start, there we go. See how that changed now? The minute I start getting some of that additional color in there, I just want to use that in some spots. As light strikes the leaves, it's gonna give you some differing colors. Colors are gonna separate some of these masses, and whether they're coming forward or going back. So I want to change in. It's also good to have some blue in there because there's going to be blue in the sky. And see how quickly this builds that painting? There, I've got some actual blue, just some blue, and I can tone it down later if I need it to be by layering color on top, or I can let it just peek out. I don't have to, and it is going to just be an additional layer of complexity to the painting. Now, there are people who will use much less paint variety than I do, and that's nothing wrong with that. I'm getting a mass right there, and I'm not happy with that, so I'm just going to lift it back and quiet it down a little bit so it's not so loud. Lifting back is way of quieting things. My paper's starting to dry, and I'm starting to get some sunlight because the sun has moved enough that I'm no longer in the shade totally, and I'm gonna have to move in a minute just to get behind that tree trunk so that the light is not falling on my tree. All right, well, I've given you the idea. I'm painting wet into wet. When that dries, I can layer on top. Like if this is a dryer, I can layer on top and quiet down and build up some values. I've started that lacy open feel. I'm gonna stop and evaluate where I need to paint, and then when I come back, we're gonna look at the landscape. Okay, so I've firmed up some of the places in my branches and my tree leaves, and I've layered additional sponging on top. I'm gonna leave it at this stage now till I get more of the outside done and I can make better choices based on that. I'm looking at this yellow that's gorgeous in this foreground, and I'm seeing in front of me in the real life. This becomes paler greens. Look at the blue-green back there that creates sections that happen on the as you move back. So this is less vibrant, and then there's almost a dusting of yellow in that. So I've played with some paint and to see if I get that effect, and I'm gonna paint masses and not individual grass leaves. So with that said, I've pre-mixed my colors and taped everything down because it is currently a very blustery day going on right now. So I'm gonna come in first, and I'm gonna lay some horizontal water down just so that when I'm starting to paint, it won't stick to the paper immediately. I'll have some time to work with it. Clean up my brush. So I'm just gonna start getting some puddles of water down to talk about that background and where they're meeting. There. And that's my blue greens. I'm starting to get some of the blue greens in there. Have that move back in the background. And I'm just letting the paint do the work. Dropping some yellows in there. And then I'm gonna come in this back, and I've got just a neutral color that's just gonna talk about distance. Now we'll come in now and just play. Where does it need something? It needs a little, not dark blue, but see, I can just take that out, and a little bit of blue wouldn't be bad. There we go. So a little bit of color in there. Gonna need some back there. Let's take our thirsty brush, lift this back a little bit, and see if I can get a little bit of cleaner neutral. There we go. That's a nice color, yeah. That'll play nicely right in there. You always put a little bit of a pinkish color or an orange if you're painting in Raleigh, North Carolina, because there's clay out there somewhere. I'm gonna come in and just part this with a little more yellow, a little bit more, there we go, a little bit more yellow. Break up that line. And that may be all the background I have right in here. So this is mainly dry right in here now. and down below where I'm still letting that dry, but I'm gonna work on this background, this line of trees that's right over there. I've pre-tested some colors. I want some quieter, neutralized greens, some grayer colors that's gonna recede. I've dropped these trees down and reduced them, and then I'm gonna let my line run a little lower down in here so it's not so involved with the tree itself. So I'm just gonna come in and start in my lower, and I've wet this area. So see how it spreads? So this is gonna be the bottom of my tree line. It's gonna have some darker colors in it, and it's gonna be the shade. Taped, there we go. Taped my everything down because it is a blustery day. See how it's spreading? That's just going to be where my neutrals are going to start to get in there and make some darks. I'm going to use some orange to neutralize this blue. And oh, that's nice. Look at that color. That's nice. I'm just playing with color. And while I got it in my brush, that's a sweet color. You observe and be shocked. Just be shocked that things are going your way and then we're not blowing off into the distance now. See how we're talking about greens and distant trees, and I'm changing it up as I go. I'm making it up as I go. And see in between these, so I'm gonna change the color in here. So just back behind this tree is gonna be some of those same colors dropping in. All of these blues. Oh, okay, I need to drop some, there we go, yes. Tone those down. See, by dropping some greens into those blues, it's creating some variations that are still talking about trees off in the distance. And I'm coming in these negative spots that you would see through and not getting rid of all my lights, but just getting some of that showing through so that you believe that there's some trees back there. Gonna get that extra wet out of there. Drop me some more. Oh, that's a nice green. See that green? And I'm just getting rid of some of these stripes that are appearing. And I'm just gonna come in between here and just, don't get rid of all the lights because some of the lights are gonna be reflections off of the leaves. And I don't want it to look too cut out, but I still need that tree to be there. I picked an interesting thing to demo, didn't I? Lots of little parts. I'm gonna come in now with a smaller brush, and I'm just gonna pick up some of these colors and just dapple them in a little bit, those darks. Just dot them in here and there so that it looks like you're seeing through to that background. But I'm not losing as much of that lights. See, and everything's still damp, so I'm still good. I'm gonna come in now with some of this pale. Yeah, this is a juicy pale. And I'm just gonna put it in some spots to darken the pales that are there, and to create some variation. This orange now. Let's see, where can I put that? Down here. There we go. This orange becomes neutral as soon as it touches those other colors, but it's going to help me create a dark that's going to be down low. It's going to be quiet and recede. And I'm going to come back in with some green. Ooh, too dark. So we're going to just take our thirsty brush, lift it back, lift that out. There we go. So you can reverse. That was just too dark. It had lost its mixing in the, there we go. See the granulation starting to happen? Yeah, just dropping color into color. It's parting some spots so it feels like there's some light coming in and out. That's nice over there. Look at that. just putting some dots in there just to feel like I'm seeing through to that color that's underneath. Now, anything, oh, see that thing that's happening there, I'm gonna try to make that happen over here. That's gonna be some of that olive. So I'm just gonna come in here and just bring some of that. A little bit slightly yellower color. Even though it's in the distance, I want a feel of light. I'm gonna test it. Oh yeah, that's nice. Let's see if that's got there. There we go. I'm gonna use it pretty wet to see if I can get it apart. There we go. If you drop water in the middle of it, look what that does. It parts it. There we go. See that dark? That's gonna be nice. At the base of those trees, just some shadows in there. That's gonna make the light play nicely. So we place it, it goes back. There we go. See that neutral pale right there? That's nice. I could come in and just lift. Now I can carve. See what I'm carving in? Some pales. That's nice. I could quiet some of this green down by lifting back with my thirsty brush, a damp brush with this just barely wet. So you don't have to just drop in. You can also carve out some spots. And now I have my tree line. Need a little bit more color right there. There we go. And now we've got that distant tree line. It's kind of dramatic. I've changed the dynamic of the painting. So now I'm gonna paint my sky. And what I've got in front of me right now is just beautiful, the clouds coming through and coming past the tree, giving me great ideas. And if you wait long enough, there's gonna be one right here so that I don't have to lose all that contrast. I'm gonna have a big cloud right there just giving me that information. I've wet this paper. If you watched my rooster video, this is that background I did in that is gonna be the same way I paint my sky right here. If you didn't watch it, you're gonna need to. So this cloud is gonna be what I'm gonna be going for. I've got some cerulean and ultramarine ready. This is really hyper wet. It's soaking into the paper, and because I'm outside, I can just take this board and just tilt it sideways and let that water run off. That excess water is just gonna drip off the surface, and that's gonna give me control back. So now I have a big soupy wet area just in here. I'm gonna leave my whites behind the tree to the extent I need them, and I'll make those decisions as I go. I've got some cerulean, and cerulean is going to recede. It's gonna be your distance, and that is great to use in the lower parts as you start to let your clouds appear. So I'm just gonna come in here and just start building some values with blues. But see that cloud right there? That's gonna be there. And then we're gonna have some blue over here, but not much. And that's dry, so I need to get some water in there. I didn't go down far enough. But there, now we've got some wet. See how that flows? And see what happens when it flows? If I come in here with a little bit of water, it just starts to part and make clouds. So I can just come in here right next to this and just start to talk about sky, and the clouds just start making themselves. I like it when they do that. And you want water in your clouds up here. You need to have that spread. And if you don't have that spread, it gets hard lines. So that's why right up next to this, just gonna come in and just drop a little blue. It'll just paste that tree into the sky in some spots. Look at that cloud right there. Ooh, that's nice. That's nice. Now see, I have the dry line right here, so I'm just gonna come in and I'm just gonna push that paint, that blue out, not let it touch the dry, because it's gonna make a line and clouds are fluffy and soft. Now I'm gonna come in with some ultramarine up here. Ultramarine with a little bit of orange in it is just gonna give me a dramatic sky. This is gonna dry much lighter. So I want to put it down darker. Ooh, that's nice. Look at that cloud just appear. It'll be a 3-minute cloud. It's really not taking long at all. Come in a little ultramarine, cerulean right there. Now what I like to do is blend the two and have a mix of the colors. I want that high area to be darker though. Just need some values up there that's gonna calm. I like to mix a little ultramarine in with a cerulean so you get a blend of the two colors. Now see, it's dry right here, so I just need to get rid of that outline where it looks wrong. So now I'm just evaluating what needs to change, what I need to do. There's some higher up that I don't know how far I'm gonna leave in this. I'm gonna drop some more blues where I need them. See, right in there, it needs a little bit. I'm gonna just get a little water since I don't want a line there, so I'm just gonna get some water, just so I don't get a hard line. That looks a little odd, so I'm gonna come in and just drop some spots right in there. That's nice. See how the size changed? I'm a little on a tilt, which is not going to be a great thing, but you go with what you got. Look at that granulation going on right there. I'm going to get a little bit more of that in there. Thicker paint. There we go. So just dropping in, breaking up some spots, deciding where I need some water still. Get some of the stuff dropping out of the sky out of there. That's plein air painting. Sometimes a bird flies over and gives you a present. I've had that happen. But it's worth it. You get inspired, you try things that you might not try anyway. Now see how I brought that blue down a little bit just to get it in there. A little water here to see I got a hard edge. Get some more of that cerulean. I think I need a little more of that ultramarine to just come into a couple spots. And that's my sky. Okay, so the sky's in, it's drying back, it's looking fine. I've got a little emptiness feeling in here, so I'm gonna come in with a very damp brush that's got just a little bit of pigment in it, and I'm just gonna come in and put a little bit of calming in some spots, just to turn down some of the pales. And see how it starts to talk about texture and change, and it's gonna quiet my edges a little bit. Send back the background, and so it's going back a little bit. I'm just dry brushing a little detail in, wetting it when I need it, testing it before I put it on there. And just, there we go, yes, that's nice. So I'm just talking a little bit about texture, and that this might actually be grass in there, and adding some interest in here. I want my outsides to be less contrasty and a little quieter. So I'm just using a little blue to send this back, reseed, calm down with some pales right in here. This is just a hint, just a dusting of color, dry brushing it in to talk a little bit about texture, and that's making the rest more important. So takeaway is, look at what's in front of you and gain excitement and interest and put it into your painting. Play with paint and evaluate as you go. Look at life around you, and it'll give you inspiration.